Censorship.
Control.
Hillary Clinton.
Very nice lady.
Very. I like how you looked over the shoulder. Very nice lady.
Myself and a couple of my friends, we discovered house music. And you encounter a certain social circle and you say right away, oh, that's me. I fit right in here.
And so I'm like, I can't miss this opportunity. So I just grabbed a guitar off the wall and I'm sitting next to him jamming. I'm like, I'm jamming with Santana right now and Manny's music. And I didn't realize you have to be heartbroken and starving to be a heartbroken, starving artist.
Welcome back to the Side by Side podcast with your hosts. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Dimari.
And we are here to engage in meaningful conversations in hopes to create unity and diversity by enlightening minds, one question at a time. We do that by bringing on two strangers each week to show we have a lot more in common than meets the eye. Today we have two amazing guests. I got Phil Rizzo and Ivan Samuels on the show today. Say hello, fellas.
Hey. What's going on?
Guys?
Very excited to have you guys on today. Obviously, Phil is my older brother, so we got some family on the show today.
Nice.
Ivan is a friend of yours that you worked with back in New York.
That's my big bro. Different moms, though.
Yeah. And, I also had the pleasure of getting to meet Ivan some years ago, so it's awesome to have you guys on, and we're going to get into some things today. Sound good?
Great.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to kick it off. We got this new segment we like to do called word association. So we're going to do 5 words just straight in the brain flow, first word that comes to mind type of deal. So I'm going to take Ivan and then Phil Dimari is going to take you. So all right, Ivan, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, sir. JFK.
JFK. President.
Basketball.
Culture.
Ooh. Conspiracy.
Government.
Ooh. Travel.
Socialization.
Oh, okay. All right. Censorship.
Control.
Ooh. All right, Ivan's tapped in.
Ivan is super tapped in.
He took these like long deep pauses. Was like control. Government.
It made it even more dramatic. Right? Like we need like some music.
I gotta think about it.
You're not supposed to think. You're supposed to just.
Well, I'm reacting.
I'm reacting. Those were good.
Those were great. So before we move forward, bro, come on, man. You told us that conspiracy. We say conspiracy. You say government. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, I mean, look. When it comes to conspiracy, I mean, some conspiracy theories have truth behind it. Some of them are hyped up. Okay, in some cases. We know we've had conspiracies throughout our time in culture, whether it's in this country, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Africa, there's always been something that's been attached to it that's kind of been secretive in some sense. So when you mention JFK, the first thing, I had to think about it because JFK was a very powerful man, but he also was a very complex man that was involved in a lot of different things. Government, as far as being the president, underworld. But the first thing I didn't want to, when I thought of him, some might say assassination. I think of him as a president that built himself up from who knows what. You know, what could have been behind him rising to the top? Was it the fact that he came from a powerful family, the Kennedys? You know, when we think about conspiracy, one of the more recent things that people thought might have been somewhat of, I wouldn't say exactly conspiracy, but let's talk about the pandemic, you know, and about how people felt about vaccines. Were vaccines pushed just to kind of get everyone in society in line, to kind of have a certain type of control, you know, to kind of take away people's choice to choose, you know, whichever direction, you know, what side you fell on, if you was for it or for not, or not. But it was something that you should have a choice to decide to make. Okay? But conspiracy can just go on for days and days. I mean, we could talk about that forever. You could talk about, you know, conspiracies with the military and the government. Let's even talk about, like, extraterrestrials. You know, like UFOs and all of that. Like, you know, like people may look at that like, oh, you know, that's a bunch of hogwash, that's conspiracies or whatever. But it's been fact that the government has kind of closed information about extraterrestrial sightings, you know, and that might be a topic of conspiracy. You know, people might put the conspiracy but behind extraterrestrials and all that. So, you know, conspiracy is just conspiring. It can be like a group of people, you know, that's why I mentioned government, or, you know, an established organization, corporation, you know, that may conspire to, you know, conceal certain information, reveal certain information at certain times through over a period of time, through decades, through generations. How does that sound?
Deep,
get us started.
Yo, so a couple things I want to unpack. First thing was, I did the JFK because recently I was listening to another podcast. You may have heard of it. It's called the Joe Rogan Experience, and they played a old video of JFK. I had never seen this video before. A speech of his that he talks about secret societies, and shortly after he was assassinated. So there is that. So that was one thing. So I love how you touched on that. The other thing was with the UFO stuff. So Dimari and I, on our first episode, we talked about this thing called the 7 Hermetic Principles, which are just ancient knowledge. And I'm reading the Kabbalion, which is one of the books that like the Hermeticists kind of like. It's like one of their main books. And in it even in that book talks about spiritual beings ascending to like the, you know, through this knowledge you ascend through the spiritual realms or whatever, and there are beings out there that we would perceive as gods or even higher than gods, you know. And just the fact that this stuff has been written throughout ancient history, like not even just in like text like the Hermeticists wrote about, but you know, you see it in cave paintings, you see it in, you know, the hieroglyphs, you see it in all this stuff, and like people love to do the ancient aliens thing, but you know, we don't know what this stuff is, and it could be any multitude of things, and it's been clearer that it's been visiting or interacting with our species for millennias. And so I love that you touched on that, because that's something that I get really excited about talking about. But go ahead, Dimari.
Yeah, I mean, they could be the beginning of our civilization.
Yeah.
We don't even know.
Could
right?
be us in the future.
Could be us. It could,
Right.
right. It could be who we should be, aspire to be. But I saw Phil just kind of like shaking his head and nodding while Ivan was speaking, and I know how much he loves conspiracies and conspiracy theories. So go ahead, add to what Ivan was saying.
I mean, he touched on a bunch of different things that I think are very interesting. I mean, conspiracy theories to me, like, they're fun, like, and some of them, they got weight, but, you don't know. It's weird because, like, conspiracy things to me, like, I don't think that big groups of people, just based on our current, like, humanity, I don't think big groups of people are necessarily smart enough to keep, a bunch of people in line and keep it secret and stuff like that. I mean, people, like, there's so many failed things in our society now. I don't know if a big cabal of people is around to organize something like this. But when people do try to organize things, like you were talking about, like the COVID stuff and the misinformation on Twitter and all that, you start to find out as time goes on, like, this guy is on the board of, some Pfizer or something. He's also one of the owners of this publication that is the, fact checker for Twitter. And you're like, I mean, not that it's a conspiracy, but you're like, something smells like shit. I think there's some shit,
It's one big circle jerk.
And when you said government, I was like, so many of these conspiracy theories, stem from government or something like it. These organizations that people say the mob or JFK was killed by either the mob or government, people that didn't like his policies. You look at things like MK Ultra, a lot of that's the other thing that blows my mind with COVID is when people are like, yeah, let's just trust what they're doing. You think about like in Africa and MK Ultra and all the different like drug testing that the government has done, and we find out 20 years later, like 70 years later, you're like, is anyone going to get arrested for that? And we just kind of were like, oh, it happened in the past. Nobody cares, whatever. Just wiped out,
Right.
entire family line, whatever.
Yeah.
So, it's funny when I'm not a big, like, everything's like there's a puppeteer pulling strings, but when people get behind something like that and they make a decision to not disclose information and that dishonesty comes in, I think that's when there's whether it's for the better, that's all subjective. So, that kind of secretive, like you were talking about, the secretive disinformation thing to try and hide things. I think most of that conspiracy stuff comes from a group of people trying to be secretive and then getting found out, like the COVID stuff. Yeah. The guy's like, well, we got to try and hide this because there's a lot of money in it. And then people are like, but don't you also fact check Twitter? And I don't think he meant to do all of that. I think he was just really bad at trying to hide it all. So then it seems like it's a big, deeper thing. You know what I mean?
So, I mean, I definitely want to get back to conspiracy theories because I love them. And, I mean, listen, I think to Ivan's point and to yours, Phil, it's just like they exist. And, he mentioned it just means to conspire. I mean, we're conspiring right now, all right? So this country was built on people conspiring.
Yeah.
Right? So they were just in a position of power where they could actually turn their ideas into reality. But I want to get your rapid fire top 5. Phil Rizzo. Tequila.
Shots.
Shots.
Baby formula.
Not in my house. We can touch on that later.
We're definitely going to talk about that later. EDM.
Mainstream.
Hilary Clinton.
Very nice lady.
I like how you looked over the shoulder first. Very, very nice lady. Good answer. Florida.
Love it.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah. Love it.
So going back to this baby formula, man, why not in your house?
I don't know. I mean, it's good because of all the scarcity stuff that's going on right now, but it was kind of hammered in to during pregnancy that my wife should just be doing baby formula or whatever from family and stuff like that. So it was it's very hard. It's very hard to like build up a supply. She travels a lot for work as a wedding photographer, so. To build up the supply, getting milk and breastfeeding and, making sure there's enough in stock is a very touchy subject. So I don't even go near the formula conversation. It's
Wait, no, I'm confused. I'm lost though. So are you like anti-baby formula or you're like...
I'm not anti-baby formula. No, it's just... I mean, all right, we'll get into it.
That's what we're here for.
My wife's mom, when we first had Addie, my wife was having a hard time, like getting milk the first couple of days. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
And so her mom just kept saying, well, you can't do formula. Formula's poison. And it was really hard on my wife. And so she just wanted to feed her baby. And to hear that, like, we can't supplement with this, it was a big area of contention, both with my wife's mom and me. And then it kind of put this thing in my wife's head of it being very, I have to do this. It has to be done this way. And so it's just been, it's an area of a lot of stress for my wife to make sure that there's a supply, my baby's fed, and that we don't have to do that. And I've tried to bring up a couple of times, well, it's okay if there's not enough. We'll just do formula. And that was not a good conversation. So I stay away from the formula.
That's so crazy. And like, out of all of the words that I could have came up with, I chose baby formula. It's like the most touchy subject ever.
Add it to the list of things you can't have at the dinner table for Thanksgiving.
Don't talk about baby. But, I've heard that conversation that, like, it's poison. And, I mean, me being a big conspiracy theory guy, I gotta believe it, bro. I feel like anything that's like almost anything that's being manufactured in a factory that's supposed to be like for my good, I just can't trust it because everything that's for my good, like God created and it just comes right out of the earth. That's the way I look at it. So, but I don't know. Yeah. But we can shift gears a little bit and let's get Ivan back in. So Ivan, if you could just, walk us through like your upbringing, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family structure. What was it like growing up? Where are you from? And, how you got to what you're doing today professionally.
Wow. Okay. So it's been a path. I would say it's been auspicious. It's been good. It's been good fortune, with, facing some adversity here and there like everyone does. But I grew up in New York City, in the Bronx, New York, and 2-parent household, hardworking people. My father was a jazz musician, but he also was an accountant. And so he was an accountant, to help pay the bills, and then as far as his art, that was in addition to raising, 3 boys and his wife. My mother started out in, she was a hospital worker, so she worked in the medical field. And then I'm the youngest out of the 3, so by the time I came around, she just kind of was a housewife and, did odd jobs here and there. So she was around, which was good. My father was, out making the money and doing his art, So, growing up in the Bronx during the time when I grew up, I mean, it was good, but at the same time, you had your hardships that you had to deal with seeing people fall through the cracks of the urban society, um but we did everything. It was, we played sports. Outside of sports, it was very cultural, especially back in the 80s. You had a lot of youth centers. You had a lot of men that was involved with the community and the family. At least in my community, it's relatively working class, you know, middle income, you know. But surrounding that, as you know, in a lot of communities of color, you can have a middle income neighborhood in one area, and then 4 blocks away, you can have a neighborhood that is, can be on the borderline of being impoverished. So you encounter everything, So I learned how to navigate through all different kind of neighborhoods and deal with a lot of different kind of people. But I would say that, my neighborhood, which I grew up with, like in a big housing development, um, it was a lot of kids and it was a lot of people, growing up, and everybody had like older siblings. So everyone kind of knew each other, and you kind of learn how to survive through your peers, and just like in life as an adult, you pick and choose your peers. You try to surround yourself around people that are positive. That have some of the same aspirations that you might have. But when you're growing up, you're just trying to like you're trying to get your identity. Especially during your teenage years, everyone's kind of trying to find out what they want to be, how they want to be perceived. You're going through a lot of different changes as far as you hormonally and how you're developing. But I always tried to just hang around people who were positive. But I think being that my father was one of the like early generation jazz musicians, I always knew that it was something else that was attached to I would just say my culture outside of what was presented in the mainstream. And not that the mainstream was good, because I came up during the hip hop generation. We was building it, a couple of different cultures of music. Hip hop, I was in hip hop, and I was um a old school house head too. So, and you know about that, Dimari, coming from Chicago, even though it's not your generation, but you know about house in the south side of Chicago. So
Yeah.
I was open to like everything. And that's kind of how it was, back in the 80s, you know what I mean? Because, right now you have a lot of access to culture and music because it's a more age where it's more technology. So you could just it's presented to you. All you got to do is press a button, go on the computer, and you get it. But in the 80s, it was word of mouth. And you had to go there, and you had to find it, and then when you found it, it was like, wow, you know, this is different. This is a different culture, and it was up to you to gravitate towards it or not. Just like any other thing in life, And so as far as me being a ceramic artist at this stage in my life, I have went through so many different stages of, being in the creative realms of doing different things, that this is just where I ended up, because this was a part of me. Because it's very hands on as far as ceramics, and it has like an attachment to nature. Which, my roots, my mother came from North Carolina. So every summer, from my generation, everybody's family was in the South for at least a week or 2 weeks. So you got to understand that it was something outside of the urban environment. You know, I know like in Chicago, you know, Midwest, you know, a lot of African Americans migrated there from the Great Migration. They was coming from deeper south. They was coming from Louisiana, Alabama, you know, Mississippi. But people moved in different directions, and you still had that connection to the culture, you know, and that makes you, you know, want to know more about your history, you know, and know more about like where you come from. And like I said, at this stage of the game, everything is there for you. That's why, you know, they call it more the information age. Right. You know, like if you want to learn about something, you go and get it because it's readily available to you. You know, also throughout cable networks. So if you think about like all the different like docu-series and documentaries that will come on Netflix, like how many people like during the pandemic just kind of like stayed home on the couch with like food and like learn new stuff learn from Netflix, from like culture, from like independent film artists that might have been around for like 20 years,
right?
You know, so it's there, you know what I mean? It's there to get. But what was great about growing up in the Bronx during my time was that, for one, it was parts of the Bronx was very impoverished. Okay, so, I mean, and when I say impoverished, I mean dilapidated buildings, you know, like a lot of fires. You know, my neighborhood wasn't like that, but that was part of the environment, you know, so it was like you really had to want, I wouldn't say you had to, people wanted to, I would say, you wanted to do well. You wanted to do better than whatever situation you was in. You know, so like class was really something that was distinctive. You know, like you can really see what a middle class community of color looks like. You can see what a middle class white community look like. You can see what a lower income class looked like. You know, it was very distinctive. You know what I mean? Like you would go into one neighborhood, things that you would have, the resources would be there, and in other neighborhoods, the resources would not be there. What I see now in New York, it's like you can get resources anywhere. You know, even if you live in more of a degent community, you know, it's still available to you because now everything is it's more money out there. You know, everything is kind of open. Not saying that solved the problem with poverty. You know, poverty is you know, is definitely by design. You know, and it has a lot to do with resources and, you know, having access to your education, but it's got to come from somewhere. It's got to come from mentorship, you know, family construct, you know. But during my generation, you know, the community was tight, you know, and you knew right from wrong, even when you did wrong, you know. Just to get into that a little bit, but I mean, you know, I have no regrets from like my upbringing, you know. I've seen a lot of things, a lot of good things, and I've seen bad things. You know what I mean? But, you know, I always try to think about like the positive side of things, because that's just life. You know?
I actually wanted to interject real quick because you mentioned house music and being a part of that scene in the 80s and stuff. And it's so funny, the overlaps on the show sometimes. But Phil was heavily embedded in the Chicago music scene and particularly the club scene for many years. He worked deep into the club scene, so I'll let him talk about that. But I know Phil was close with one of the original house artists, right, Phil, from Chicago. What was his name?
Frankie
He died
Knuckles.
a few years back.
Yeah.
Frankie Knuckles. Yeah, so Phil, tell Phil. I don't know. Ivan might geek out for a second. Will you just talk about your relationship with Frankie Knuckles?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't hang out a ton or anything. I worked a festival. We threw a bunch of festivals and house music parties in Chicago over the time I was there with a bunch of different promoters and clubs. And one of them was Wavefront Music Fest, and Frankie he had my stage, and so he was having trouble kind of walking at that point, and I scrambled, did whatever I could to find him like the right height chair. We were like on a beach in Chicago performing, so I'm like dragging road cases through the sand, and he just saw me busting my ass for him, and he just, as a thank you, he wanted to invite me out with them and to dinner, and then we hung out for a bit, and it was at a very transitory period in my life where I was debating if I should move on or fight for what I want or what. And he just kind of gave me some of the best advice that really kind of shaped where I went from there in the scene. And it was just telling me, he's like, oh, I had a similar situation, and it's like you either need to be able to make the change that you want to see or remove yourself from that situation. And so that was the advice he gave me to, and I basically was like, all right, I either want to make the changes I want to this venue, and bring the scene in that I want, or I can go move on and do it somewhere else. And that kind of changed the trajectory of where I was at the time, and that was all just his advice. So
that's awesome.
This guy.
Absolutely. I mean, like house music for me, like, just really opened up my eyes to just like, how, in life sometimes you meet certain people or you encounter a certain social circle and you say right away, oh, that's me. Yeah. I fit right in here.
Yeah.
I fit right in here. And that's how house was for me because, I came up in a hip hop scene and I'm talking teenage years. That's the height of hip hop. But somewhere around, I would probably say like my late teens, myself and a couple of my friends, we discovered house music. And during that time, the big club in New York was Studio 54.
Yeah.
And a famous DJ that used to DJ at the Garage, which came up with Frankie Knuckles as well. His past name was Larry Levan, and he would DJ at the Studio 54. Now this is like the Studio 54 after the era of all the superstars going there. This is like the comeback of the Studio 54 because this is when you had your Barbra Streisands, your Grace Jones, Madonna, all these different, Liberace, I'm taking it a little back, but this is like post that era. And when I went into that club and I seen like all different walks of life, different cultures of people, different kinds of women, everybody just free, like dancing and music, I was like, Yep.
For sure.
This is definitely something I need to just add to my social life, Yeah. So, I always, when I met Dimari, met Dimari, we worked in a ceramic studio together. Mm-hmm. And I, would tell Dimari little things here and there, but one thing about living in like different time periods, you can't really you could talk about it, but you can't talk about it to the degree to where it's like, oh, those were the days. Because everything changes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you get caught up in like talking about like that same period of time, you know what I mean? People could tend to look at you like, well, this is a current time. You know what I mean? And this is now. You know what I mean? What you're talking about then. But, you know, I've always really been fascinated with like, you know, living in Manhattan, because I lived in Manhattan is equal as I lived in the Bronx. So, you know, by my early 20s, you know, I was already out living in Manhattan and moving around. So, yeah, you know about that house scene.
Yeah,
You know, with
what's
Frankie
interesting,
Knuckles.
Ivan, that you say that, because I think what you touched on though kind of transcends the time, and that's the finding the community within the thing you like. And like for me, when you were speaking that, it kind of like makes me think about when I moved to Chicago and was in the music scene there with my friends. You know, whether it was like funk, soul, hip hop, kind of like bands, live bands that we all played with, and then, you know, talking about like finding your tribe or whatever. Like, I think one thing when Dimari and I met, and because I always, for me, the way you speak about house, that's like R&B for me, and so when I met him and some of the dudes we did music with back, you know, 10 years ago, that was kind of like a similar feeling for me. And then when I was in my band, same thing. So I think what you were speaking to about, regardless of era or time, the thing that transcends the time moment is the finding the tribe, the culture, the music, the community scene and stuff like that.
Yeah. And it, you know, and it's crazy
throughout
like,
life.
Yeah.
He had told me like, you know, like now how you go out, there's like the, you know, I don't know, the top 40 DJ or the top 40 type club. There's the gay club. There's the black hip hop club. There's the white club, so on and so forth. And he's saying that at this time period, this Studio 54 era, everyone was just partying together. That's insane to me, bro.
Yeah,
like that.
awesome.
Everyone's partying.
That's insane, and I would love to see something like that.
Everyone was partying in New York like in the 80s, because one thing you got to realize is that, you know, you have music that will always hit the mainstream. So, like, if you think of 80s, you know, MTV is just starting to come to light. Michael Jackson is like the first video that MTV would play, because there was a big thing with MTV. They said that they wouldn't play any black artists, and they pushed Michael Jackson to be played on MTV as far as videos, to kind of introduce Michael Jackson globally. Okay, because, you know, Michael Jackson came from, of course, as we know, the Jackson 5. And the Jackson 5 was really more of, you know, a black soul iconic group. Once he went solo and he started to incorporate rock and roll aspects into his music, pop music, when Quincy Jones started recording a lot of his work, it was like, how do we get him to hit like the major mainstream market? You know, and he was one of the first to be played on MTV. So you got Michael Jackson, you got Prince, you got these certain artists, but then you got all these other artists that you can't even really say what genre they were in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you just had bands.
Right.
You know, they might have been playing rock. They might have been playing progressive rock. They might have been playing funk. You know, they might have been playing gothic. They might have been playing this. But if it was good, it was happening.
Right.
And you would find out about that when you went to the club.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be like, oh, who's that? Oh, that's this group. That's Talking Heads.
Right.
Oh, that's Talking Heads. But you don't know what they look like. You don't know what David Byrne really looks like.
Right.
Because it's not really videos.
Right. It's just how the
You know what I
music make
mean?
you feel, which is actually
it's just how the music make you.
It's a good thing, because I know that you know, Phil, he does this. He's a DJ, and he understands the importance of getting that music out and how it just touches the soul. So just walk us through your upbringing, Phil, like how your structure, family structure, how you got to where you are, and then get back into the music, what you're doing currently professionally.
As you see it.
Well, my back hurts now.
I'll be your fact checker.
Yeah, he's like
your Twitter fact checker today.
I'm gonna tell mom.
I got a bad back from carrying this family the whole time. No, I grew up a very similar situation to Ivan here, where we, like two parent family. Although I was the oldest of the two of us, we lived in Twinsburg, Ohio, which was a very diverse community in Ohio. And I just grew up always. We didn't have to want for too much. We were able to, our parents were able to kind of help fuel our passions. I was very into music at a young age, and so I think one of my first Christmases when I could barely walk, somebody got me a drum set for Christmas. So that was the first time of being all right, let's fuel the music fire. And then I think probably about after a month of mom and dad having that in their house with a toddler, that was thrown away. so we started
until 5th grade when I got one.
Well, yeah. So I always wanted whenever Christmas came around, I'm I want instruments. I wouldn't ask for stuff. I just want to save up for an instrument, a guitar or whatever. And I always wanted a drum set. Never got a drum set. And then Brandon asked for it. Oh. He got that drum set, and I was oh man.
But you got the guitar
so I got on
first.
To play. Yeah.
You got the guitars, I got the drums.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they even got y'all a drum set. That's the loudest. It's like that and a trumpet. No, you can't. No, do something else. I don't know. That's me personally.
Well, that was the fuel for the fire, though, is getting that stuff and even my kids now. That's one thing I always kept all this stuff. So I've got djembe and drums and guitars and trumpet, and there's a violin somewhere around here, and it's I just want my kids to be able to go and grab. Some people are very don't touch my stuff, but I want them to be able to go grab whatever, and it's figure it out if you want. That was something. Right. Having those available to me was huge for me, just to go and plunk on a piano for 5 hours and not know what the notes were, but all right, this interval sounds good, and then let me all right there, that's the first two notes of this song, and then put that together. Just the exploration of it without the rules was a lot of the fun of what fueled me in that direction. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. And so you're in Twinsburg, you're doing music, and then what next?
I went to school in Pittsburgh at Point Park. I don't know what I was doing in my senior year. Everybody knew what they wanted to do. I'm I don't know. I was in a play. I was in a musical. I was in show choir. And I'm I want to keep singing and dancing. So my girlfriend at the time applied for Point Park, and I didn't know it was a big musical theater dance school. I was I'll give it a try. And then I got in, and then I was oh, this is a really good school for this. Maybe I should just feel it out. So I kind of went down that path. Life had handed me this thing. It was hey, maybe you should check it out. So let's check it out. And while I was there, I started really, really heavily getting into playing my own stuff for the first time for people and doing cover songs. And there was kind of a hip hop, soul, jazzy venue called the Shadow Lounge that had just opened up. And I became really good friends with the owner. And he used to book me to play there all the time. I bring a lot of my friends from the colleges out to the Shadow Lounge. And that was just a really cool vibe of artsy. There was rappers and scatters and jazz and just this whole conglomeration. It's kind of like you were saying with house music. And it just people from wherever up on stage together, and they would sometimes have these jams where you'd have a guy up there on the drum set and somebody would come in, and I saw bands form out of that. One of my buddies that was a guitarist would go up, and then he started working with that bass player, and then 3 years later that drummer's working with them, so it's just cool to kind of watch that community kind of come together. And then I kind of was still in school just to finish up for, make my parents happy. But at that point, I was kind of touring around booking my own shows at different colleges. And wanted to pursue being a musician, which brought me to New York City. And I lived in Queens for a bit. I went there and was like, all right, well, here I am. I don't know what I'm going to do now. And I ended up getting a job right away at Manny's Music. I didn't know the history of it or anything, like right down on 46th, I want to say, right by Times Square, on Musicians Row. And then as I got hired, I started finding out the whole history of like, this is where the rock stars go to get their stuff before they go on tour. So that was a wild time for me. Like we saw like Santana came in and I'm like, oh, right over to the PRS's, like, cause that's what he plays, thinking that, you know, I don't know why I was like PRS, this is what he plays, but he has a sponsorship. It's not like he's looking to buy a PRS here. So he grabs this old beat up Fender and starts jamming. So I'm like, I can't miss this opportunity. So I just grabbed a guitar off the wall and I'm sitting next to him jamming. I'm like, I'm jamming with Santana right now at Manny's Music. And that's then awesome. That was every day there, you know, like my buddy Parks, just where he would meet all these producers all the time. And then through his networking from people there, and he's now like on one of the biggest hip hop podcasts in the country. And
what's it called?
I can't think of the name of it right now. You got to cut me blanking on this out.
I mean, the biggest ones is like the one with Joe Budden.
Joe Budden, yeah.
Yeah.
So they used to do it out of Parks' basement. I used to pass out on the couch when we go drinking in Brooklyn. so like I didn't know Parks had got into that. My buddy Devin was like, "How do you know?" Because Parks and I were in a band together, and they're like, "How do you know him?" And I was like, "How do you know Parks?" And they're like, "Oh, they did this giant podcast in his basement." And I was like, when I saw that they like recreated it on stage on tours, and I was like, this is so weird. But yeah, no, I mean that's how it was though at Manny's. Like Dee Snider would come in, or like the Stones would come in, Maroon 5, like just every day you're working. Like Zach Wilde came in one day. We shut down the store. He got beers for everybody and just talked to us about being on the road. So like as a 21-year-old musician trying to make it in New York, like there were rock stars around you all the time, and I mean, you can't afford to party with the rock stars all the time. So that was you don't learn that till after your money runs out. But it was just such a cool experience and really inspiring. And then I started touring with a group called the Pulse on Tour, which is kind of like a So You Think You Can Dance offshoot. I was our audio engineer, and I toured around all over the country and realized like Chicago in the summer was one of the coolest places.
Yeah.
So my brother was going to school there at the time, and in New York, I wanted to go out there. I wanted to be the Heartbroken and Starving artist. And, like the John Mayer, like got a little chip on my shoulder, a little tear in my eye, just writing songs about breakups. I didn't realize you have to be heartbroken and starving to be a heartbroken, starving artist. So when I ran out of money there after 3-4 years and was just not in a really good place, and up until then I was not necessarily a lazy kid, but I'd always kind of taken whatever life had put in my way and, followed the river basically. And when you're in a bad situation, I was broke, I was miserable. I just had a bad breakup and, I kind of wanted to find it out. I was always kind of a lazy kid, and my motivation to have a drive to get out of that situation, that was like a point in my life that really changed, because it was like, now it's up to you. Like, you're not a kid anymore. You're not relying on mommy and daddy. You're not in, your goal of being this heartbroken, starving artist has been shattered because it's not what you thought it was. Being on the road all the time and coming back, and your friends and family are in a whole different place than when you left them. It's very difficult. Yeah. And I said, I had to really reevaluate my life goals, like what made me happy, and I didn't know where to go. So it was kind of just start doing something all the time. Don't be lazy. Get off your ass. Go record. Go just do this. Read a book. Just do all the time. And that's what kind of pulled me out of that slump. And so I went to Chicago. I realized I wanted to be in music, but I didn't want to be touring. I didn't want to be a big rock star. I like performing, but I started with my knowledge of the music industry, I started managing Brandon's band and a few other artists. And then eventually people saw what I was doing marketing-wise and had me do marketing for clubs, talent buying for clubs. And now I am a business manager for a lot of big DJs and movie directors and stuff. So musicians. So I kind of still get to be in the space, but not be on the road and everything. Although I do miss it. I do miss the itch. That's why when I started DJing and running Chicago nightclubs, one of my buddies was like, "Man, you're around this all the time. Like, why don't you just learn how to DJ?" And I picked it up pretty quick. And I mean, I wasn't like, the greatest DJ ever, but I was getting booked a lot. All over the city. I mean, sometimes like 3 times a week, like festival weekends, you'd be doing like 8 shows, like after parties, and it was exhausting. It was so much fun, but it was also like, I wanted being a DJ and having your crew and like being in the front performing music was so close to being that rock star I wanted to grow up with that it was like. I don't know if you ever read The Alchemist.
Yeah.
Like
I have an Alchemist tattoo right here,
like,
bro.
Hey,
For real.
You're like, well, it's like the boy in the crystal shop. It's like everything is good here. I can make the money. I'm happy.
You become complacent.
But it's just not. It's almost there, but there's just that itch. And so I between that and having my kids, it was kind of time to get out of nightlife and being out. I started right when the pandemic happened. I started kind of doing my music again, and as I started to get back into it last year, after we moved down to Florida, we had Felix, my son. So now I'm just starting to kind of get back into doing music, and I love like where we live in St. Augustine. There, every bar, every restaurant, there's somebody playing music in it. So I feel like I could, successfully do that a couple nights a week down here without having and earn a living, as opposed to, having to earn a living by being on the road and being away from my family. Yeah. So I feel like there's a nice happy medium where I can still do that, earn a little bit of side cash, and still have my day job and be here. Yeah. And so that's what we're working out right now. We're testing that out.
Are you a small business owner, young professional, or pre-retiree looking to grow and protect your assets but don't know where to start? With all the noise about stocks, bonds, cryptos, it can be hard to know what steps to take. Let Black Swan Financial Group help you so you can focus on doing what you're good at. Black Swan Financial Group is a telefinancial planning firm operating in select states nationwide. They're here to help you protect, create, and grow your assets. Visit BlackSwanFinancialGroup.com today to get your free consultation. Hey everybody, Brandon and Dimari from Side by Side here. Just want to tell you about one of our newest sponsors, Ease Web Development.
Ease Web Development specializes in building high conversion websites and marketing campaigns that take your business to the next level. They're the easy decision when it comes to marketing.
So check them out now at www.easewebdev.com. That's ease, WEBDEV.com. Now back to the show.
Love that, man. So you said a lot there. You both said a lot there. I kind of want to go back to something, and you don't even have to respond, but I just want to let everybody know Pittsburgh is my least favorite city I've ever been to in my entire life. And
it's probably mine too, to be honest.
For real?
It's up there.
Dude, it's so bad. And if you can avoid it, don't go. What I can say is the baseball stadium is beautiful right there on the river right there. What's it, Allegheny, or how do you pronounce it? That it's a beautiful stadium.
There's an Allegheny and the Mahonganadela or something like that.
I don't know, but that design is super beautiful. Not too far from the university, right? That great top tier musical theater school,
Carnegie Mellon.
That's the U Pitt is a cool school. Like they have this. It's just a great building. The campus is beautiful. But so go see those two things. Get right out of there.
Phil,
don't stick around.
When Phil was telling the story about
Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh,
you don't see is Lawn Street.
Yeah. I was just about to say, Phil was talking about Pittsburgh when he was broke college student. Bro, he lived in the hoodest of hoods, bro. It was scary.
No, I've been there, but it's gentrified now.
the house that Phil lived in college, bro, the ceiling in the basement sank down to about this level.
Oh, jeez.
Bro, I was like, how are you guys legally allowed to live here?
They're not.
This is crazy.
They're not.
No. So true story. Our basement, there's an article about it. It was on Lawn Street in Pittsburgh. I think this happened in the 90s, early 2000s, or it was before I lived there. Man, that was a long time ago. I just realized how old I am. So I think it was the 90s. The guy who lived next door got so sick of hearing the dog next door bark, he dug a tunnel through the bricks in the basement because it's row houses. Went in the house and killed the neighbor and her dog.
Oh my God!
And when the cops came, they caught him cutting the body up in our basement. That's where I lived.
Oh my God!
And I don't know if you know about Pittsburgh. A big thing there, I forget what they call it. There's a name for it. Is a toilet in an unfinished basement, in a corner of an unfinished basement with no walls or nothing around it. I forget what they call it. It's just a toilet and a laundry sink.
Insane that has a name. Thing. That shouldn't even be a thing.
Yeah.
So Shittsburgh.
So yeah. No, I
heard a lot about Pittsburgh.
Oh, have you never been?
Never been, but I heard it's just not the greatest place.
No.
I know it's always had a history of being very segregated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the funny thing about like Pittsburgh is it's west, but it's not quite Midwest.
Right.
It's moving towards Midwest, but it's not east.
Right.
And I always looked at Pittsburgh kind of being like right in the middle of, I don't know where I am.
Right.
You know, like you
the best way to explain it, bro. That's like literally the best way.
I don't know where I am.
No, you shouldn't be there.
That's where I was in my life at that point, so that was a perfect place to be. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. There's 3 rivers. Let's see what we
hate.
Yo,
not to hate, but.
No, we can definitely hate on Pittsburgh on this show. I'm telling you, man. I just don't like it. The people are fine. I've met some nice people from Pittsburgh, but just don't like the city. But you spent some time up in Roxbury, and that was strange when I found out about that. Like, can you walk us through what the hell you were doing in Roxbury? Although Roxbury's that's like Detroit Red was up there. Malcolm X before he was Malcolm X. So like, because I went to Boston. one time. I actually went up there with Dan to go catch a game at Fenway. They played the Yankees. And so we took the mega bus up there, had a lot of fun. Another segregated city. I think we were there for about 13 hours. I might have counted 8 black people the entire time. I was like, every time we would see one, I'd be like, there goes one. Dan's like, could you stop counting? I'm like, no, I cannot stop counting. I only saw 8.
All right. I'm gonna give you the real lowdown on Boston.
Let's get it.
Oh, okay.
During the time that I ended up migrating to Boston, I had been doing ceramics for maybe about 3.5 years, and at the time I was a director for recreation and arts for a foster care program that was run by the state of New York. And I was there for about maybe 7 years or so, 7 to 8 years. And I worked with adolescents, ages 15 to 20, 21, they would transition out. A great job, being that I had the most creative space to kind of work with the population, and being that it was residential, we had about 25 kids in the house. I had a nice budget. So I was the fun guy, right? So it was great. But maybe around my 5th year or so working there, I was living on the Upper West Side. I had a nice apartment on Central Park West. Everything was great, but I started to get a little burnt out. That's how I started to get into ceramics. That was like my outlet. On my day off, I started ceramics because I had so many different titles. I was managing a mentoring program, and I had, kids that wouldn't show up. They wouldn't meet with their mentors, and I'm like, oh, this is burning me out. So I got to find this next creative outlet. So I ended up making a move to Boston. Now, I had been to Boston for maybe about a weekend, during at the end of a semester in college when I was attending school in upstate New York. Friend of mine, we just said, hey, let's go to Boston. We're like 20. We couldn't even drink yet. We was like, let's go to Boston. So we went to Boston, and both of us being New Yorkers, we was like, hey, this is kind of like a small New York. You visit a city for the first time. Of course, you're going to stay right downtown in the tourist area. You're going to stay in a nice hotel. You're going to go to the parks. You're going to go to the famous restaurants. So it was cool. But I never really envisioned going to Boston. Okay? But there was an excellent clay school that was in Boston. And I really, kind of like what Phil was saying a little while ago. It's funny how we piggyback on each other's experiences. You get to a certain point in life when you say, you know what, I got to mix it up. I got to do something different. I could have easily stayed in New York and had a rent-controlled apartment, although it was the size of like a little box where most New Yorkers live. Oh, but I'm in New York.
Hey, you're on
the
Upper West Side too, man. That's nice.
I'm on the Upper West Side. I could go out and get a cab, even though the cab doesn't stop for you sometimes, depending on where you are. But I'm in New York, So I ended up going to Boston, right? Now, the thing about Boston and New York is can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think Phil muted himself.
Boston and New York has always been kind of rivals.
Yep. Right. Yep.
When you come to when you live on the Northeast, your major three cities is Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. We know New York is the city. Not even on the Northeast, but internationally, everybody kind of migrates to New York City. So when I went to Boston, my vision was to throw New York City out of my mind. Throw out the history of it being, a segregated city, a city that experienced a lot of racism throughout the 60s and prior, and even in the 70s when you had the big busing movement, integration, desegregation of school systems and all of that. So, Boston's always had a certain kind of stain, but, growing up in New York in a city that's so big, that has so many boroughs, you get a little Boston, you might get a little Chicago and parts of Queens. You might get a little bit of Philly and Brooklyn. You might get a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah.
So I always been one that was all around the whole city, throughout the whole 5 boroughs. So when I got to Boston, I seen certain aspects of how segregated New York was in the 80s. How you might have an Irish neighborhood there. You might have a Latino neighborhood here. You might have an African American, Caribbean, and Latin neighborhood there. You might have Italians over here. But by the time I got there, and this is 2000, around there, 2010, 2009, it wasn't the same Boston that had that reputation, for generations, because we're living in a different time. And I think most major cities, they have their identity, but if they have a history of being a certain kind of way, they kind of want to not have that stain, of having that type of image, of it being, however, whether it's being conservative, whether it's being segregated, whether it's being racist. So my experience in Boston was really good, because I didn't go there to really make friends and meet people. I went there to hone my craft.
Yeah.
And most people who have ever lived in Boston, who've experienced Boston, they'll tell you Boston is a very good city to go and work on your craft. You know, because really it has a big city kind of bravado, but it's really a small town kind of city. It's really like a college city.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have your, you know, your top institutions. You have your, you know, your Harvard. You have MIT. You know, you have Northeastern.
BU, Boston
It's just
University.
a college city.
Yeah.
Boston University, you know, Boston College, you know. And then you have a lot of, you know, really elite medical facilities. So it's really good with medicine. Now, to piggyback on what you're saying, Dimari, as far as you land in Boston, you went to Boston, you are a man of color, you're a black man, you're walking around, and you're looking for that diversity. And Boston is definitely another one of those cities with bands, history with rock and roll, like Aerosmith, and I believe Dave Matthews Band even came from Boston. Like a lot of bands, but a lot of bars, and like big on sports.
Yep.
You know, so you go out, you know, you got people are drunk, they're drinking beer, you know, you got the Bruins, you got the Red Sox, you got this like Boston real like image, like, you know, Boston is it.
Yeah.
You know, they have a distinctive accent, just like New Yorkers do. But the flip side of that is that there might be more people of color in Boston than there are white.
What?
And or it's somewhere around 51 to 49%.
Wow.
Now, when I
had
say
no
people
idea.
of color, right? So I say people of color. If you're looking at like African Americans, Caribbeans,
Sure.
you're looking at like 29%. Okay, then you're looking at like Cape Verdeans, which is a little island off of West Africa, which the Portuguese had colonized, and it's a direct flight, I believe, from Cape Verde to Boston. So that's like a very big community.
Interesting.
Okay. And then you also have, of course, your Latino coaches, your Dominicans, your Puerto Ricans, what have you. You have everybody, and your Haitians. But the history of Boston is that everybody kind of always had their own neighborhoods because it was always a city of class. You know, it was always like a class of city. So when you come to Boston, unless, and this is a phrase that we used earlier, I don't know if it was Rizzo or Dimari, the secret society. Yeah. When you come to Boston, you gotta find your secret society. You know,
well, that's where
you gotta find your secret society
with those institutions.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Exactly, of course, that's the first city. When you find it, it's like, whoa, I didn't know there was this many people of color here. Now, how I was exposed to that relatively early during my stay out there is, you know, my background is, you know, how Dimari has met me as far as being a ceramic instructor. But I've always been a youth development program planner, working with youth programs, working with nonprofits. I also mentioned that, you know, I was in the foster care system for a long period of time. So when I went to Boston, I was a director at a Boys and Girls Club, an enrichment program for youth. Now, the interesting thing about the Boys and Girls Club program that I worked at, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Boys and Girls Club of America.
Yep.
But in Boston, they have the Boys and Girls Club of Boston. Now, the owner of the Boys and Girls Club of Boston is the son of the owner of the New England Patriots. His name is Robert Kraft.
Yes,
He's
sir.
the owner of New England Patriots. His son started the Boys and Girls Club. They started the Boys and Clubs of Boston. So you have a Boys and Girls Club in what you would call cities. In New York, we call them boroughs. So, you know, you have Southie, which is traditionally known for, like, you know, rough Irish working class neighborhood. You have Roxbury, which has always been black. You have Dorchester. You have Mattapan. You have all these different neighborhoods of people of color. But you would never know unless you lived there. So when I started working for the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester, I lived in Cambridge. So I lived maybe about 10 blocks away from Harvard. Harvard. That's how they would say Harvard. You know, I lived about 10 blocks away from Harvard. You know, and I would compare Harvard, rather Cambridge, somewhat kind of like Park Slope. You know, like in Brooklyn. You know, but not as diverse, of course. But being that you have Harvard, you have MIT, you have a lot of transient people coming from all over the world, all colors, all nationalities, Asians, Africans, you know, people from Europe. So a lot of these people you have, and some of them at some point stay, you know, if they like that smaller city, you know, and then some of them leave. But to touch on Roxbury, Dimari, like Roxbury was known to be like the Harlem of Boston for generations. So, you know, back to my conversation earlier about the great migration for black people in America, going north, going west. There were those who migrated to New York for better opportunities. Some migrated to Philadelphia, certain cities in New Jersey, like Newark, Jersey City, whatever. And then there was those individuals who kept migrating to New England, to the north, and they landed in Roxbury. So it was always a strong culture there. And how you mentioned Detroit Red, you know, which was, of course, we know as Malcolm X, he had spent time in Boston, and he opened up one of the Nation of Islam chapels, or, you know, places of worship in Boston. And believe it or not, in interviews, what he said was that his time in Boston was a really good time. He really was received well due to the fact that he was immersed in the black neighborhood. Okay, so, you know, as you know, Dimari, as far as Chicago, you know, I've been to Chicago, and I know you got the north side, you got the south side, you got the west side. And, you know, to my understanding, the South and the West is more, you know, people of color, Latinos, black. But, of course, you know, there's parts of the North Side that's I'm sure, mixed as well. But segregation is good, can be good, and it could be bad, depending on how you approach it. You know, if you corner yourself in a corner and stay in one community, and you don't take advantage of the accessibility of other communities where you may be welcome, then it's bad. But during the time when Roxbury was being developed, during the time when you've had that image of, you know, race with Boston, like, Roxbury had a lot of love, and a lot of people was doing well outside of it being, you know, an inner city community that dealt with all its different issues that, you know, you deal with, you know, in urban environments. So for me, you know, Boston was good because I got the opportunity to work with the community, you know. So I was an educator, and also the fact that I was a ceramic artist was really well respected amongst my community. You guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it was well respected in my community because, you know, they kind of gravitated towards an individual like myself who worked with my hands, who was creative, who was craftsy, because crafts has always been huge in New England, you know. So, I mean, for some people, you might go to Boston and, you know, a lot of people, that's not their favorite city, you know, but due to how it's designed, due to the secret society, as I mentioned. But for me, Boston was like the size of like one borough of New York.
Right.
So within a year, I was like, okay, that's my people over there. I know how to go over here. I know. So after about 3.5, 4 years, like, all right, I'm ready to pack it up.
Yep. Back to the Medina.
I'm ready to move on.
So
back to Medina.
I've only been there once, but the layout was just beautiful. The landscape is beautiful. It just reminded me of Chicago. Like it's a nice city. It's a beautiful city.
It's
Beautifully
definitely a city
designed.
I've always wanted to go to, but something that Ivan said earlier about New York kind of hit home, because I remember there was a time I came to visit you when you were living in New York, and I had like visited New York growing up as a kid for a couple trips that were just like tourist type trips.
Yeah.
So that I always had this like New York like was a dream place for me to like move to someday or visit or whatever. And I remember it was actually the second trip that I visited.
That's when you.
That's when I met Ivan.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. It's coming full circle now because, like, I remember on the train I got that, like, dreamy feeling. I'm coming in and I get off the train at the Grand Central Station or whatever. I come up the stairs. I'm, like, getting ready to cross the street, like, come meet you up at the Pottery Studio, like, just stars in my eyes. And here's this dude on the street in a suit. And he's just, like, going to work. He's like, And, like, we get to the corner. And, you know, the traffic is so crazy and the cabbies are, like, warring with each other. And there's just somebody laying on the horn, another person shouting. And the dude is, like, on a business call, like, he's dressed nice. Like, he had, like, a $10,000 suit on and a briefcase. And he just, like, in the middle of his phone call, he's like, hey, shut up! And I was like, I'm in New York, bro. This is why I like this place.
Going back to what Ivan said about like the tribe, like I just always had a deep connection to New York City, and I know that the three of us have all lived there. And it's just like a place like no other place. And I had never been there in my life. Like I would literally I watched movies and TV shows and stuff as a kid. And I was like, I'm going to move there. I know I'm going to move there. So the moment I graduated college, I graduated like that December. My lease ended that February. I moved. Like I didn't have a job. I had like, I don't know, like $2,000 or something saved. And I was like, yo, I'm out of here, bro. I moved. I stayed in the hostel for like a few days, bro, like trying to find it. It was, I didn't even care, bro. Like I just wanted to be there. Like I remember like that day standing in the hostel, I was walking down the street and I saw a sign that said like, 99-cent slices, and I was like, nah, they're not gonna swindle me out of my buck. You know, I was like, this is a scam. And so I didn't do anything about it that day. And so then the next day, during the day, I'm walking by and it's like half off until like 4 p.m. And I'm like, dude, they really, but then it's like people lined up and I'm like, this can't be real. And I walk in there and I had a 49-cent slice and I was like, bro, this is exactly where I belong. They have 49-cent pizza. Like, this is insane. I love that place, man. I would never have left that place if it wasn't for going back to the conspiracies and the government and the pandemic. Yeah. But you had a question?
No, real quick. Dimari was telling me, Ivan, you trying to grow the locks out. Did you get that idea from Phil as well?
Yeah, Phil's been growing his locks.
Phil's covering up the locks right now. No, I was just joking.
So I just started my journey, and man, how'd you get into the whole lock journey, man?
Well, I was going through definitely another one of those periods, you know, my early 20s, you know. I was going through some transition, you know. I had some, I guess, family, encounters, family issues I had, with one of my siblings and just life in general, just trying to figure out, like, what was my next direction, And I just grew my hair out. You know, I always kept my hair low, but I also had afros, and I never was afraid to kind of like experiment with hairstyles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially if you know about like the house scene and
Mm-hmm.
the East Village. You know, how music kind of always like reflected like people's fashion choices, and I was always kind of like a arty type of individual. And it was just one of those times in life where I said, you know what, I'm gonna grow my hair out. And you know, I grew my hair out in like my early 20s, like you know, maybe like 21 or so, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
You know, I just kind of went into like a long hair frame of mind. You know how like, you know, when you take a step towards something, you know if it's you or
Right.
not.
Yeah.
Not saying that if I had to like if I wanted to cut my hair short, I would.
Yeah.
Right.
But once I went in that direction, I was
Just
like,
feels right.
Yep.
okay,
Yeah.
this
Every
feels
so
right.
often, I get the bug. I get the
feels
bug
right.
to grow mine out. I've grown it out 2 or 3 times now in the past like 10 years, and always gets to a certain point where it's just like, damn, this has got to go, man. This is too much to
I've had my
take
time
care
here
of.
before.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. I mean, it's also like a spiritual
Yeah,
step.
definitely.
Yeah.
You know that you take. You know, and you know, like I said, my spiritual step was, you know, I had certain issues that I was dealing with. You know, as far as growth. You know, as far as myself, but then, you know, family always plays a part in certain things. You know, you start to deal with certain obstacles as you start to get older. You start to, you know, perceive things a little different. And I guess I was just trying to come into my own a little
every
more
time-
at that time. And I said, you know what, I'm changing my hair.
Yeah, every time I grow it out, it's always during a spiritual period.
Every
like
time.
heading into a like change in my life, and that's like that spiritual period. But I know Phil.
As I was saying earlier, like
I got it.
the transitory thing, like just doing something. I'm like, when I get through those, I'm like, I'm just gonna change everything. I'm gonna grow my hair. I'm gonna start working out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start drinking more water. You know, you're like, I'm just gonna start doing whatever. And 3 weeks later, you're like, oh, my hair's still growing.
Yo,
Yeah.
real quick before you ask your question, I do remember Phil has had some funny haircuts, and as his brother, I definitely could not let him go without busting his balls. He had this one time back in like 7th grade, he did the mid part where all the white boys had like the Jonathan Taylor Thomas cut. It was like and Phil looked ridiculous. It was like a bowl. You had the bowl cut, dude. You had the tips, the frosted tips.
Sean
well, I
from
did the
Boy
frosted
Meets World,
tips
that
too.
was like, oh.
Yo, you got to find a picture. We got to impose
Hell
that
yeah.
on the edit, bro. No, I feel like
boy band
the
face.
hair is super spiritual, and I mean, even me like getting on this, it's been the same where I've always been like, I'm gonna do it, and I grow it out, and then I just don't know what to do with it. But I always like envision myself locking it at some point.
Yeah.
And then I finally crossed that threshold.
So you're trying now.
I'm not. It's happening.
You're doing it.
We don't try. We just do it, bro. Like it's just happening. So
You just
do it,
Just
man.
go for
So I'm super excited about it. That was me turning 33. You know, to me, you know, 33 is about mastering yourself and self mastery. So, really excited about that. But you know, Ivan, you mentioned a lot of this stuff stem from family and stuff like that, and makes me think about Phil. And you know, he is you've been an adult your whole life. Like I don't have any kids. Rizzo doesn't have any kids. He's claiming. Ivan, you don't have any kids either, right? So how do you make that transition from, you know, being an artist, being a man on your own, living your life as an artist, and then becoming a family man? What's that like?
And becoming what? Okay, yeah. It's you, Phil.
I think like before, like when I was saying, you know, you're kind of, I was ready for a change anyway. You know, like where I was in the nightlife, it was like that just close enough, and I was just ready for something different.
Yeah.
So when we had our daughter Adelaide 4.5 years ago, I was already kind of like on my way out, but this was a good excuse to like oh, I can't be out every night anymore. You know, like, oh, sorry, you know, like can't make it to that one. And like, I'm not a big club guy.
Really?
Like, I'm not a big like let's go out. Which is funny. I was out because I was working.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like this is I get uncomfortable when I'm out and like. I don't know. It's just weird. I'm not like the big social. It's like when I'm there, I'm more comfortable when I'm working at the clubs. So you know, yeah, I'll drink, I'll party, I'll have a good time. But to get me like out there was, I always used to joke around. It was hard to get me out, but then I wouldn't want to go home. So like what you know when. I was already. It was kind of a catalyst to already get out of there, but when we found out we were having Addie, it kind of helped me with that. And at the same time, a lot of the artists that I was working with at the clubs, my now boss Dan, he was my good friend at the time. He was starting his own accounting firm and business management firm, and so a lot of the guys who were looking for help, I kind of sent his direction. So as he started to expand his business, he's like, hey. These guys already know you. They trust you. Do you want to think about maybe come working here part-time, see how it works out? And I've been with Iconic Business Management ever since. And so, you know, having that kind of steady job and then already kind of wanting to be out, like having that something to transition to was definitely super helpful with that change. I think the biggest things, I mean, even now to this day, and I'm, 4.5 years in, is you don't have a you anymore. You know what I mean? Like you do a little bit, but I mean, I all these guitars here, and I rarely get a chance to play them unless like I've got a gig coming up, and then I have to like crash course it for like 3-4 days straight, or if I got a random, like yesterday I had a random, I went to go see Incubus the other day. They kicked off their tour down here in Florida, so I went to go see them. And so I was kind of inspired. I just wanted to grab the guitar and play something last night.
And then Felix started.
But those become a few.
Did Felix start playing along with you?
Yeah, they just. He did come. He likes to come in and dance.
Oh,
so. Nice. But those moments get like fewer and far between. Like you don't have much time to do that anymore. Like especially with moving during the pandemic and everything. You don't meet as many people, have as many friends where you're like, hey, let's go out. So you do become, just from the nature of those things, you kind of shrink your bubble a little bit. Like I know now I'm going to work, and then I'm going to, we're going to feed the kids. And like, I have a blast playing with them. Like my kids are so funny. Right. So like to go, like when I get out there, it's not like, we're putting on Sesame Street or we're we're playing, we're like roughhousing and like, I'm trying to teach my kids stuff like, Addie, she's getting ready to start school in a couple weeks. And, like 2 years ago, she was already writing her name and doing ABCs. It's just being engaged in it. Like, like I always said, like, it was like the river, you just kind of, whatever came up. Like none of those jobs, the club stuff, I never applied for any of those jobs. It was never like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I had the passion for music, but I didn't want to be on the road. It put me into like management. I missed the performing, so it put me into a little bit more of the DJ club scene. And once I realized I didn't want to be out all night, and this happened, it was kind of like, I always knew I wanted to be a good dad, so this is my chance to kind of do that. And the reason, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't have time to for the Phil things I used to do, but the things I do now, like I enjoy teaching and playing with my kids.
So
I want to teach.
So you always wanted to be a dad?
Yeah, I think so. I always want to be like a dad and a good dad. I mean, so many of the shows I watched growing up, were like, family based, like sitcom TVs, and they always had pretty good family relationships on it. And we grew up with great parents, and you always want. I mean, not that mine wasn't bad at all, but you always want, your to, do better by your kids, and like, so it's you always have that. I always like babysitting and like playing with kids, and when you get to a certain age and you don't have kids, you can't just play with random kids.
No, you cannot.
People think it's weird.
No.
They're like, why is this guy
Why is
what a great segue, by the way, because we're to tie it all together. We in the beginning talked a little bit about conspiracy theories. I mean,
Epstein didn't kill himself?
It's the master of all conspiracies right now. Now they're moving Ghislaine Maxwell down to a minimum security prison.
Oh, is that right?
So they can murder her.
Uh-oh. I love it. This is good. See, I haven't been following any of this stuff, but I did notice that they gave R. Kelly about 30 or something.
Yeah.
And that was just like the New York case. I think he's got like a whole nother like case coming back to Illinois or something.
Another case.
So he's going to be in jail forever.
So just keep adding years.
Yeah. So moral of the story, don't play with people's kids, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Leave them kids alone.
Well, man, it's been a fun episode. I could feel like I could talk to you guys all night. Definitely would love to talk more conspiracies with you guys. It's been fun. What do you got?
I was just gonna ask, like, since we were on the topic of like just family, though, I was just curious. Like, do you want kids? Is that something you ever wanted?
You know, it's funny. I always thought I'd be a dad. I always loved kids. I was a camp counselor. I, taught a little bit, like not taught, like taught, but like was, in like arts camp instructor and things like that. And so I love kids. My wife doesn't want kids. And the older I get, it's weird. Like the older I get, the more the like urge I had when I was younger fades. And I don't have like a push or a draw, and maybe it's because my wife doesn't want them, but I don't have this like this need to like go and be a father. So I feel like if that isn't an innate like need right now, or like a urge that's like I must do this to fulfill my spiritual quest, it's probably not something I need to do at this moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's real. Ivan, did you ever want kids?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought I would have, at least one kid, but it just hasn't turned out that way. And, never rule it out. But kind of like Rizzo was saying, the older you get, the more, I think the more selfish you get certain ways. Kind of like Phil said, he wanted to change, he wanted to have a family. But now he has to invest his time into his kids and his family, and that's a beautiful thing. And, you have to make that choice, when it's presented to you. And, sometimes it's presented to you and you're not ready for it. Other times it's presented to people and people act on it. But, it's funny, when I was leaving teaching today, and I was taking a train home, and New York City subway, you hear all kind of conversations. People are talking on their phone. Most of it you block out, but it's hard not to hear the sound bites. And I heard this guy talking on the phone, and he was talking to someone you could tell that he knew over a period of time. And he was talking about his kids, and he was saying, he was an older guy. He said, "Well, I have a 26-year-old." And I have a 22-year-old. My 26-year-old, he's definitely at a place where he's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing positive things. I've already been through it. And it seemed that the guy on the other end was telling him, like, well, you're not so great like you think you are. Definitely could tell it was like an old friendship. And his response was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He was like, "I don't make bad decisions. I make decisions." So he was like, "Who do you think you're talking to?" And that was the key thing I heard that he said. He said, "I don't make bad decisions. I make decisions, and within that decisions, you get certain outcomes. Now, within that outcome, things might not be to your favor. You might say, damn, maybe I shouldn't have made that decision, but now how do I deal with that decision, because that's in the past." So, it's just kind of like, having kids. I mean, I think some people have kids and they bring kids into the world and they don't have intention on bringing kids into the world. And then when that time comes, they're not ready.
And they don't step up.
You know, and then there's others, and they don't step up and be the father. You know, like Phil said, you know, you always want to be a father because you did have, you know, sitcoms through the 80s and 90s, you know, that always had that image of family, you know, and then, you know, in your development years, you look at him and you're like, oh, I like him as a father.
Now you don't really want to be Bill Cosby.
I want to be a father like him, you know? Right.
One thing that was pretty funny, like when you were saying like the transition, so many people that I was friends with in the nightlife industry, they would tell us kind of like, oh, kid, you leave the scene when you got kids, so people aren't out anymore. It's like, oh, those people with kids, oh, that's gotta suck. Like, no. And it was fun, but like once I had kids and I realized like how much fun it was, and like how much I loved it. Right. It gave me an opportunity to show people that, like,
how good it could be.
You guys, because I've been in this little circle where you guys are like, suckers, and then I'm like, it's not like that though, guys.
Right.
Like, come on, check it out.
Right, check it out.
Check it out.
Right.
And you are good parents, man. You're good
parents. Never say never, Rizzo. Never say never.
That's why I said I never put a never on it, but you know, it's just not the time.
Right. Yeah, man.
It's not the time. Yeah. Right.
Well, this has been a blast, man. This is something I've been looking forward to for some time. I think it was everything and more.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much in the beginning that I would love to talk about, but we're out of time because they got into the we may have to
part 2 conspiracies. I'm diving in.
And we have to get
we have to have a part 2.
We have to get Chris from episode 3 on here too, so we can. But yeah, man. So Phil, if the people are looking for you, man, where can they find you?
Instagram at Phil Rizzo Music, and that's about it. Somewhere on a stage in a
I love it, man. I got to get down there. I haven't been down there.
Yeah.
And Ivan, man, if the people are looking for you, where can they find you, man?
Well, definitely Instagram. That's definitely one of the social media handles that I enjoy. Just kind of putting my ceramics out there, and the name of the business is Lamp Pots, and I really focus on pushing my my craft through Instagram. So catch me there, and we take it from there.
I love it.
Lamp Pots at Instagram.
Lamp Pots, and we'll put that in the show notes. And I actually have one of your pots at home. It started off, it was a plant with succulents in it, and I don't think I'm ready for kids because
I remember
even my succulent died. I mean, he's like I got it from. He's like, nah, man, it's easy, man. It's easy. You don't even got to do it. It's a succulent, man. It's a succulent. Just a little water. That thing is dead. Okay, it is now a candy dish. Okay, it's a candy dish now. So
all right.
It works.
That's the function.
Exactly. That's the beauty of pottery. No matter what, if it's an open vessel, it has some type of functionality, right?
Is it green?
I gotta see. I was on the website. I saw you got some pretty awesome like incense burners, but I didn't see it on the website.
Awesome. Let me know if you want one. I'll make some.
I'm glad we had this because I do want to get some stuff for the house for me.
Look at that. Yeah, those are cool.
I need one. Can you fit Palo Santo in those or no? Is it just incense?
Palo Santo, sage,
okay, cool.
Incense cone, sticks, resins, the whole
stay on at the end, bro. I need you to send me one of those. For real. I'll send you money.
Ivan's got the Instagram video, so there's some jazz and like Palo Santo coming out. I'm like, I want that.
Man, I mean,
I was on the website. I was like, I don't need pots. I need
that. Y'all need a collab.
Yeah, Rizzo, I'll start working on one for you.
Yeah, right, because you can custom make them, man. So y'all need like a collaboration or something where you can jam on one of his next videos and while he's like throwing pottery or something like that, man. That'd be dope.
Do it up.
Hey, we'll do it up. We'll do it up. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Phil.
Yeah, you too, man. I go to New York every once in a while. My office is based out of there, so if I'm out there, we'll grab a drink or something.
I had a good time, man. Hey, just real quick before we close it out, would be remiss if we didn't mention one of our sponsors, Jennifer Catherine Photography. So shout out to Jennifer Catherine Photography, Phil's wife. She throws down. So if you need a photographer for an event, corporate, weddings, baby shoots, the whole nine, she's got you covered.
And Rizzo, where can the people find you?
At Rizzo Feels.
And you can find me at judahclan.com. Until next time when we're side by side next week, take care, guys.
See ya.
Take care. Thank you.
Yes.
Love.